right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for waiting. I know that a couple of you been waiting for a little while. Hopefully, everyone can hear me all right. In fact, I know you can because I got this little hearing thing in on this side. So set that aside till we get Mikey on here, and then I'll double check his sound. So today we have a very fun topic. I don't know, fun is not quite the word for it, I guess. I feel like it's possibly the end of a national nightmare, I guess we'll call it. Um, but I'll do a little monologue here in a minute. So first about me, my name's Anthony Horvath. I'm an author, writer. That's like a redundancy. Um, Publisher, rabble rouser, farmer, kind of a prepper. I kind of do a lot of different things. It's usually kind of nice until things stop working. Um, I haven't promoted any of my books yet, but that is coming in due course. This podcast is actually a means to promote the books that we publish um, and authors whenever we can. And if you want to be a guest on the program, send me a text or a message, excuse me, through X. You can find me there. I'm not going to really go into some of the authors that we publish right now. I've been promoting them in every other podcast, but you can see on the bottom of your screen there a book called Gemini. I've already talked about it in all the other previous podcasts, so we're just going to let it go for now, and I'm going to head right into my monologue. But like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I mean, it's embarrassing to even have to say that, but the bottom line is I can't succeed without you, and it's just the way it is. So help me out. Oh, and share, too. Share, absolutely. So here's a little bit of monologue, and then we'll bring in our guest for today. I feel like the country broke when JFK was killed. And I know there's a lot that happened in the 60s that followed that. And I'm no Kennedy fanboy. There were some things about his policies now, as a more conservative-minded person, that I didn't approve of. But I never doubted his good faith. I mean, not like I was alive at the time. um, he has come across to me historically as operating in good faith. And he really meant the things that he said, and he really wanted to make the country better. And he was aware of the traps that had been laid for him by the military industrial complex. And that may have been his undoing, possibly. I wonder what the country would be like if he had survived, if he hadn't been shot at all. He probably would have won re-election. Maybe his brother would have won. We could have had a Kennedy in office for all the way through 76 or further if the other Kennedys had picked up the mantle. So they really could have left their mark on the country. And if nothing else, what was stymied was the will of the people through the democratic process. Somebody decided that they did not like what Americans had selected, and they chose to take matters in their own hand. And to me, when I look back through history, and I look at what happened in the 60s in particular, I just feel like the soul of the country kind of snapped in two. And again, I say that not as a Kennedy fanboy, but just as, it was like the death of the sincere politician. I'm having trouble finding the words to say it. And you don't have to necessarily agree with those politicians who are sincere like that, but at least they're going to tell you what they really believe, and you can take them at their word. And if you don't like what they do, you can vote for the other guy, but you're not going to kill the other guy. And I know that RFK was assassinated, and MLK and Malcolm X But those came later, and I'm not so sure that the country would have been in the same place where they were killing off leaders like that if JFK himself had not been killed. Now, all that said, JFK was killed, and now we have another problem on top of that problem. They have clearly concealed a great deal of information from the American public from the very beginning and until the present day. I mean, that's what we're going to talk about today, because supposedly we're going to be seeing a whole bunch of JFK files come out along with some of the other ones, and maybe we're going to finally get the truth of some of this stuff. But I think that the cover-up was probably as toxic as the assassination itself. It basically cast doubt on everything that the government, the federal government in particular, said after that. And even though I'm a young whippersnapper and I didn't really come of political age until the 90s, that was when Oliver Stone came out with his movie JFK, and I was, like many, reintroduced to the issues. And it's just been really hard to trust the government, and you should never trust the government. And that's healthy. You should never trust the government. But this is a different kind of mistrust. This is not the government just sort of going off the rails and your normal corruption. This is like a malignant kind of not trusting, and it hasn't been good for our society. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think we've been worse off for it, and I'm really hoping, really, really hoping that when these files come out, we're going to get some closure. We're going to get, it's not going to be pretty, possibly. We're going to share some views about that here coming up real quick about what exactly is going to be accomplished. But I think we need that closure as a country on this and a lot of other issues. And God willing, between RFK Jr. and obviously Trump and now Cash, hopefully we're going to be able to have that reckoning that only full transparency can give to us. So I'm hoping for that. So that's my monologue. Waiting patiently in the wings is author, one of my favorite authors, actually. I have his book right here. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's the wrong one. Oh, my bad. My bad. The guest is Michael DiMercurio. Mikey. Dark Transit. It's about time to bring him in here. I think let's... here he is.
I am going to get you for that. When you least expect it.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to plug this in my ear and make sure everyone can hear you. Oh, yeah. You're coming through loud and clear. Awesome. Yeah, when I least expect it, I can't wait. Maybe when I come and visit the ICE station in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, last time we talked, I got a little bit of static for not mentioning the new book coming out. So I'll just pause and plug that. It's called Ambush of the Dragon. Strangely enough, it was actually hard to come up with the title, but it has the British submarine Ambush in it, and it has a Chinese submarine called the Dragon. So you'd think it'd be kind of obvious, but
yeah,
we went through a lot of work to get the title done. But it comes out March 4th in all formats, including the audiobook, which is narrated by Joe Courtmanche, and his voices are hilarious. So give it a listen.
Okay. So I recently just finished this one. Ambush of the Dragon is a continuation, right? Like the third, or is it the fourth?
It's the third. The second is called Panic Switch.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'll get a review up here in the near future. I did post something on X about it being adequate, and you rushed to clarify what that meant. And so now I'm a little bit nervous about my review. Um, maybe not too many inside jokes on the review, I guess, huh?
Yeah, the word adequate in the submarine force is used to indicate that the performance was magnificent, but it comes from seaman superstition that if you greatly applaud someone's performance, they might get cocky and
Yeah,
then mess up the next time. So you don't tell them they did a great job. You tell them they did an adequate job.
yeah, sure. Yeah. So I enjoyed the book. Is the next book gonna be as long as this book? 645 pages.
Yeah, it's actually a little longer, believe it or not.
How long does it take you to crank out a book that of that length?
Well, I wrote Ambush of the Dragon in 100. I take it back. It's the one after Ambush that I wrote in 189 days.
Wow.
Ambush took about 316 days. So
Okay.
I went from 316 days to 189 days. So
So we have somebody congratulating us on the audio. So we were Mikey and I were talking about all the things that went wrong on the audio the last time that we were together. His mostly it was my fault, but I'll just tell everyone. It turns out that my CPU cooling fan was dying, and I mean like really like dying. So there was huge pull on my CPU, and I mean the next day, uh, the fan was actually clunking, like it was only going around like 2 times a second, and that was my panic switch. Actually, turned it off before I did any damage. But no wonder my computer couldn't keep up with all these different streams coming in. So the word in the chat is we sound great. So good. Do you have the chat up?
I do. It's coming up blank for some reason.
Well, no biggie. I'll just tell you what they're saying. Mostly it's good things about me and not too many bad things about you so far. So yeah,
I'll win them over.
yeah.
The next hour, I will win them all
All right.
over.
So let's get into this this topic here. Uh, so you would have remembered where you were when JFK was shot, I assume. Like you were old
I,
enough.
I think everybody who is alive does. At the time, I was 5 years old. I had chicken pox and I was in a bathtub with oatmeal.
Oh, wow. So you really do remember.
My mom was very shaken up and crying, and it's weird for a 5-year-old kid to see
Yeah.
his mom like completely blown away like that.
Right.
So
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. I wasn't alive when JFK was shot, but I was alive when Reagan was shot, and I was homesick that day. I would have been 6 or 7, I think, and I remember that um, pretty clearly. So but you grew up in the well, okay. So you remember the assassinations of RFK, certainly.
oh yeah.
So when did you enter into the Cold War as a warrior? Did you notice that I was describing you as the Cold War warrior?
Well, I went to the Naval Academy in '76, graduated in '80, went to grad school at MIT, and that's when Reagan was shot, by the way. And
Okay.
back then we weren't all plugged in like we are on social media now, or able to watch a 24-hour news channel. But still, that was very powerful. We all found a TV someplace and tuned in to watch what was going on with President Reagan. Um, After that, I went into the nuclear power pipeline, nuclear power school, nuclear prototype operating and an operating naval reactor submarine school, and then showed up at my submarine sometime in 1982 and immediately went on patrol. So
Okay.
I was attached to the fast attack sub Hammerhead, and we won the Cold War.
So I think you told me in a post somewhere you got out of the service in '89. Is that
Right.
about right? Okay. So sometime, I'm really interested to hear more about those experiences. I'm afraid you're not going to be able to tell me about the things that are really interesting, even now, or kill me afterwards, maybe. But um, I
Well,
think,
I think it'd be good to have a new podcast that's just maybe devoted to some Cold War sea stories.
yeah, absolutely. Because even like in your book, The Dark Transit, at the very end, you say that a lot of the things that you describe in it are true because they happened to you.
Right.
So that's
Right.
kind of is that kind of like your way of beating the censors, the keeping the Pentagon out of
You
your.
know, from what I understand about the Navy and the Pentagon, I think they kind of appreciate my work because it sort of frames the submarine force as a group of very courageous heroes and patriots.
Sure.
And so they have no argument with what I write because it
Yeah.
recruits for them. It's sort of the Top Gun effect, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Right. So yeah, obviously, a whole nother podcast for sure, and we might have to schedule it for a different day so that we can get court march because he informs me that I have not scheduled my podcast at an appropriate time for his schedule. So you just can't please anyone, I guess. Yeah.
That's a lie. He's just trying to weasel out.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know really where to start with this JFK thing because there's just so many places you could start. So how
Well,
about yeah,
let
you
me say
just
a
go.
couple of words about that.
Yeah.
One thing that comes out of this is the Warren Commission report on the assassination. One of the guys named to the Warren Committee, the Warren Commission, was Alan Dulles,
Right.
who was the CIA director fired by JFK 2 years before. Now, does that sound like the first brick of a conspiracy in the wall?
Sure
I think
does.
it does.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the second thing that's interesting is that Representative Gerald Ford was also named to the commission, and he was rewarded with the presidency later. So, it begins to look like something was whitewashed, and they zeroed in on the single shooter theory. Um, the thing that happened later in 1979, Congress did another investigation, and their conclusion was that this was a conspiracy and that there were two shooters.
Right. Yeah. Right. The select committee. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the thing is, if that had all just happened in a vacuum, maybe the whole thing would have been believable. But it really strained credibility with the magic bullet, making 5 wounds all by itself. But I think the thing that did it for me was that years later, RFK Senior is blown away,
Right.
and Martin Luther King is blown away.
Yeah.
Both those guys are on the enemies list of CIA and FBI, and their assassinations were just a lot of things didn't add up.
Right.
So I came to believe that CIA, FBI, and the government were in on this thing. And then today I listened to a prison confession by a guy named James Files, who confessed to being the second shooter. And he told his story for about an hour and a half, and it was extremely tight and extremely credible.
Yeah.
All his orders came to him from the Chicago mob. He says he's the shooter on the grassy knoll, and described how they were walked around and familiarized with the place by Oswald himself. He says Oswald wasn't in the book depository, that all that was a setup. That Files himself said that he did the shooting, and he actually got chewed out for it because the guy who was doing the shooting in a different building than the book depository, they wanted all the shots to come from behind.
Hmm.
And
Right.
felt like he only had a tenth of a second left to get a shot off, and that the shots that had already been fired were ineffective, that Kennedy would have lived. And if he'd waited another tenth of a second, he would have hit Jackie. So he took his shot, and that's when the bullet went through, the temple at JFK and pushed him back, which you can see in the Zapruder film.
Right.
And it's really interesting that they kept the Zapruder film under wraps for years and years and years. But if you roll the AI cleaned up version of it that takes out the shakiness of the camera and cleans up the fuzziness, you can see that the last bullet that hit Kennedy came from the front, and it was in the movie JFK as well. So
Right.
all that narrative fits very tightly together to make you believe that this was a hit. Now, Files said that his instructions came from the Chicago mob. We know the Chicago mob and CIA had some connectivity. And he was asked like 5 times, was CIA involved? And he kept saying, I have no idea. I took all my orders from, my mob boss.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, very clearly a conspiracy.
Yeah, and it raises some. I keep hitting my stupid mic. So the mob angle has always been part of the conspiracy lore. So that isn't necessarily new, but it's interesting to me. So that guy, I think, if I remember correctly, because I actually watched the same interview a few months ago. He had told his story as early as, I think, 94. And then only a little bit later did the interview that you saw get recorded. But this was a this was a known quantity, and yet there was no interest then and no interest now, which like you wonder what is the media doing? Like, how, to me that would be like frontline news, like actually on the thumbnail here. See if I can bring it up here real quick. I'm just gonna move it up. I'm probably gonna screw it up. That chick, Luna something. She's a congresswoman. She just came out only like a week ago or so and said, yeah, we've seen these new files and it looks like there's 2 shooters. and like nobody blinks. Like, so
that's been the unofficial, whispered narrative going all the way back to the 60s, because I think a lot of people doubted that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only guy who did this. Yes, he was a Marine. Yes, he was a good sharpshooter. But what he would have to do to make all those shots was damn near impossible.
So do you think there even now is like a media blackout on the whole thing? Or do you think that just everyone believes there's 2 shooters and it's just not a story? It's just not even controversial.
I think it's controversial, but what I also think is one thing we've learned from the Doji audits is that the media is in the hands and in the pockets of the intelligence community. And, that was actually admitted to by a former CIA director. I forget which one. But he said every newspaper and major television network was owned by CIA.
Right. Yeah.
And that was how they were knocking over foreign governments, was just by taking over the media and then feeding everybody a narrative in lockstep. So I'm not so sure that the media, I think they're the lapdogs of the intelligence community, and they do as they're told. And I think they were told, give this story no play.
Right. Yeah, sure. It's kind of distressing because they're supposed to be the ones that are the check on governmental abuse, but it doesn't really work when they're in on it.
Oh, yeah. So I think, we were talking about the declassification of documents by Representative Anna Paulina Luna. I don't know why she's got 3 names. but
Usually they'll
it's
usually you've killed somebody if you have three
yeah,
names.
yeah. You have to be a serial killer to get three names out there. But
Right.
on the document breakdown, here's some thoughts. There were 5 million documents that have already been declassified. Can
Yeah.
you imagine that? 5 million? I know of no world event that would generate 5 million documents. I mean, that would fill up my whole house,
Right.
floor to ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then they said that they've discovered about 2,000 to 3,000 documents that were not declassified. How do you discover documents?
Yeah, that's nuts.
And how many documents as of now are as yet undiscovered? Because they've been swept under that, unused desk over on the left side of the office.
Yeah.
And finally, one FBI agent testified before Congress that he was ordered to destroy evidence, documents. There was a letter written by Lee Harvey Oswald to the FBI, and his boss told him to get rid of it, to shred it, to burn it, make it go away. So if that happened in one document, that a guy testified under oath to Congress that happened, how many others were destroyed? And I guess the last thought I have on this, and I'm borrowing this thought from Scott Adams, is that, if you're going to do something evil and nefarious, do you really keep a paper trail?
Right.
And if you did keep a paper trail, wouldn't you shred it and burn the shreds?
Yeah. That's actually kind of where I was going with this. Like, there's a lot of there's a twofold reaction to this, to what you just said. So, like, on the one hand, when these files come out, it's hard to imagine that there's going to really be anything in them that gives the closure that I was talking about, because by this time, anything that was really definitive and put individuals in the crosshairs, like called name names, as we'll say, that stuff's all gone. Like, they've had plenty of time to get rid of it. But at the same time as I'm saying that, thinking that, the fact is they have waited to release these. Like, there must be something in these files that they don't want out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all of these documents were supposed to be out by 2017, but Mike Pompeo convinced Trump not to release this last batch.
Right.
And it's not really just only the 2,000 or so documents that Pompeo convinced Trump not to release. It's the documents that are already released are heavily redacted.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's got to go through there and pull all the black stripes off the page.
So,
But in my opinion, I think it's about time that they put together a new assassination commission and look at it from ground zero. Now,
what do you
witnesses
think
have died, evidence has disappeared.
Yeah.
But I think there's still enough there to draw a conclusion.
So Trump came out. He was asked in an interview only like a week ago. He was the interviewer. I think it was a Fox News interview. Said, you promised to release these files in your first term, but you didn't. And then he just says that he was convinced by people that he trusted that it would be bad. And then they said, well, what's different now? And he's really ambiguous about it, but he says, I think it'll be okay now. And the insinuation to me was that the people two things were possible. One, that the people that he trusted in his first term, he no longer trusts, and he just screw them. Or two, those people maybe have died. And the only person that comes to my mind is Kissinger. And I never really followed up on that thought to see what Kissinger was doing during 1963. But still, it makes me wonder what on earth could it be that even now they're hiding. Like, there must be someone there must be a person, I think, that is going to be implicated in these files that they don't want us to know about, and I just don't
I'll
know
take
who
a
that could
guess
be.
for you.
Yeah, what do
Here's
you
a
think?
guess.
What do you think?
I think the George Herbert Walker Bush was involved,
Yeah, okay, all right,
and because his son George W. Bush is still around,
sure.
that's part of the reluctance because it's going to smear his father's name.
Yeah, that thought did occur to me. I actually tried to do a little bit of research on that. Actually, this was even before I decided to do this podcast. Um, I think there's like a picture that people say they have of him in Dealey Plaza. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen the picture, but I've read a lot of documents about where exactly George Bush was that day,
Okay.
and he, it points to him being in Dallas at that moment.
So, if people don't realize that George Herbert was also a director of the CIA at one point.
That's right.
So,
He's as much a spook
yeah,
as Dulles was.
right. Yeah. Boy, we're going to end up talking about the CIA a lot, aren't we?
There's going to be black SUVs showing up in my driveway tomorrow.
Your driveway is better than mine. Hey, he said it. It wasn't me. He brought it up. So the okay. So one of the things that I thought was interesting about the that James Files, is that his name? Did I get the name right?
Right, James
Yeah.
Files.
And he says that he actually changed his name, so he had a different name back then. Then he changed it after the assassination for obvious reasons. Um, so that kind of ties in with the whole mob connection. But there's so many things that happened on that day and in the cover up that suggest that maybe the mob was they were the footmen of the whole thing, but the field was cleared for them. Have you seen the video of the Secret Service agent being called off from
A
the
long
Nazi?
time ago, I did. Long time ago, I did. I think there's a couple things that I learned today. One of them was that an envelope was passed to Files that had in it some Secret Service credentials. So it looks like there was somebody inside the Secret Service who may have been in on this. That the exact route of the motorcade was passed to Files. So there was somebody inside at Secret Service who did this, or it may have been a CIA guy who, wormed his way into the Secret Service's files. It's unknown. But the other thing was, what I was wondering is why you would ever have a convertible and open limousine passing through an area with tall buildings.
Yeah, yeah,
And what I heard about Dealey Plaza with all these civilians just freely roaming around, where they could throw a rock at the president if they wanted to. Where was Secret Service back then? Why didn't they have all that area cordoned off?
right.
And why was the Secret Service not walking around to make sure somebody wasn't hiding a weapon someplace? There should have been a Secret Service guy or a detachment of Secret Service on that grassy knoll.
Yeah,
They should have been through every building and every floor that looked down on that plaza.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you a video. I don't know if you've seen it. I actually was unaware of it until a couple weeks ago. Looks like we're gonna. Let's see. I want to make sure people can see it. So what this video is, it's gonna be. Just here we go. The Secret Service agent, the one that like runs alongside the car, was actually like pulled aside. He was pulled off just before he went, and you can see his confusion in this. I don't know if you've seen this. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, I made the wrong screen bigger. That's stupid. I have 3 monitors. I need 5. Okay, here we go. And I don't think we actually need to hear it, so let me turn off the audio on it. There we go. So I found this video on YouTube while I was trying to get ready for this. So what you're going to see is the motorcade is just starting out, and the Secret Service guy he's called back. You can see him right there. So he would have caught a bullet, right? And then the guy in the car behind him says, "Hey, stop." So this video is going to show it again a couple times. I'll go one more time through it. Okay, so have you seen that video before?
No, that one I haven't seen.
Do you need to see it again at all?
He looks like he's saying, "What the hell?"
Right. Yeah. Do you want me to show it a couple more times, or do you think you got the gist of it?
No, I got the feeling.
Okay. So like, this is kind of what I mean. Like, so yeah, the mob may have been the triggerman, but when I look at something like that, I think to myself, okay, this is actually almost like a well-oiled machine. Like, they set up the dominoes all across. Like, they lined up everything. They probably did have somebody shooting from the book depository. I don't know. Some people dispute that.
Files mentioned a different building. There was also High Window.
Yeah, you're right.
I forget the name of it, but it was probably close to the book depository. But I agree with you that there seems to be an extraordinary level of coordination. The thing is, there were so many organizations that had a motive for this.
Right,
You had the Cubans who were pissed off about Bay of Pigs. You had the military that was pissed off about Vietnam and the Bay of Pigs. You had the CIA who was pissed off because Kennedy said he was going to reorganize them and downsize them and maybe even reduce their status to just a runt of what it was at that time. And then the mob, which was furious at RFK for they cheated JFK into office in Chicago. They won Illinois by resurrecting dead people. And the mob was their arrangement was, look, Kennedy, we'll get you into office, but then you're going to take care of us and let us go unmolested. And when the Attorney General Robert Kennedy went after them like a mad dog, they felt so betrayed that I think that gave them a big motive. So they were the guys who were executing some stuff. But like that video you just showed, there were a lot of people inside the government who were, cooperating as well.
Yeah. So, we'll come back to that, I think. But so I have this Warren report here, which I was telling you. You said, "Oh, is it 10 pounds?" I'm like, "No, it's only like half an inch." And then I've had this book. I read it. I've had it so long. 20 years ago. And I was so young then, so naive. Turns out it's a condensed version by the Associated Press. So, this is not, the Warren Commission already is, not a believable report. But now it's been filtered through the Associated Press. And this is what I thought reality was. And, for a while. It's almost embarrassing. But I went through this. And this won't surprise you, but there's no mention at all, no curiosity of why was this Secret Service person pulled off from walking alongside the motorcade. Like, not even any mention at all. And to me, like, that's like a. It's not a smoke. It's kind of a, well, no, it is kind of a smoking gun, isn't it? Like that whole thing, like that. Someone in the Secret Service knew that Kennedy was intended to be left exposed, and the Warren report, as far as I can tell, has no reference at all to it. Like a 100% complete lack of curiosity about it.
Oh yeah, they jumped right into Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone shooter without without doing some things that they could have done. The audio evidence that came from a dictaphone showing 4 shots instead of 3
Yeah.
was covered by that 1979 investigation, proving that there was more than 3 shots. But I think the thing that interests me is how they confiscated the films of all the civilians who were taking pictures and taking films.
Yeah.
And it reminded me very much of how immediately after the Pentagon was hit on 9/11, FBI agents showed up at the owner of every camera that might have been pointed at the Pentagon, the hotels, the gas stations, and they were there minutes and seconds after impact. How did they know?
Somehow I knew this was going to end up with 9/11. Well, so I don't mind talking about that. We can talk about that. But to me, that illustrates what I mean in my monologue when I was talking about how there's this malignant mistrust of anything the government does. There's nothing that can happen in our world now that we will trust the official version of ever again. Like what happened with JFK was so egregious. They're asking us to believe something so absurd, really, that now, like, everything's on the table. Like, we're willing to believe anything. So, okay, so what? Go ahead, tell me, what do you think about 9/11?
Well, you kind of have to put yourself back into the mind of how things were in 1963. People were getting their news from Cronkite.
Sure, right.
If you watch old videos of Cronkite, the guy is so amazingly credible and so trustworthy, that it's almost a hypnotic effect.
Yeah.
It's hard not to believe anything he says. It's just like Uncle Walter just told you that's how things are.
Right.
There's only a couple of newspapers. They all trumpeted the same thing.
Yeah.
Only a couple of news networks. They all said the exact same thing. So you never really missed a story. You just had to look at one source because they were all saying the same things.
Yeah, right.
Things changed with cable news networks. And until suddenly they, became under the thumb of the intelligence community. But in 1963, if the government said, this is how it was, nobody disputed that. I think the egg cracked with JFK because the narrative was so unbelievable. For example, how did they catch Oswald so fast?
Right. Yeah.
It's like they knew exactly where to look for the guy, and they knew it was him that they were looking for.
Yeah.
How did that happen? I think one thing that viewers on this might want to consider is watching the show on Hulu 112263, which was a Stephen King story that was made into a mini series, a streaming series. And it's really amazing. You frame the question yourself, what would the world be like if that assassination had not happened? Mm-hmm. And so it's the story of a guy who goes back in time and stops Oswald from assassinating JFK. And then he comes back to present day and he finds himself in a nuclear apocalypse.
Yeah, actually, I find that almost conceivable.
And I don't think it was Kennedy that did it. It's just that when Kennedy was there, there were some really bad guys who got into the presidency after him and,
right. Yeah.
tore the world apart.
Yeah.
But It's just a very interesting concept.
So I feel like you may have intentionally avoided telling me who you thought actually hit the Pentagon in 9/11. But you don't have to
Yeah, the
talk about it if you don't
Pentagon,
want to.
the Pentagon, it just was not a jetliner that hit that building.
Okay.
I mean, that was a Tomahawk cruise missile, start to finish. There's too many improbable things about a jet hitting the Pentagon. Street lamps that weren't knocked down, how the security camera conveniently left out about 5 frames, when the jet would be flying toward the building.
Yeah, that
Uh,
video
the,
camera is dumb.
the damage pattern, is nothing like what an airliner would cause. When an airliner crashed, jet engines being big and all, they usually survive a very heavy crash impact.
Right.
And their turbines have aluminum billets that are like 5 or 6, and they're as long as the jet, and they're virtually indestructible. So you will find pieces of engine all through the crash site. You'll also find landing gear. It's very difficult to destroy landing gear. I don't care how much fire, how much jet fuel is going on, but you find landing gear. And that Pentagon site's wreckage, it does not match, a 757 or a 767. It matches a Tomahawk cruise missile. There's a little radial, an axial turbine that they found that's like suspiciously much lower in diameter than a commercial airliner's turbine. So anybody who believes that the Pentagon got hit by a jet airplane, a commercial airliner, God bless them. Believe what you want to believe, but you'll never get me to admit it.
Did they ever find? I mean, okay, based on what you said, I already know the answer to this, but I've never asked it before, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Did they ever find, putatively at least, the black box for the Pentagon airplane?
No, not that I know of. It would have been very interesting if they had, because that would have proved their story that it actually was a jetliner.
Yeah.
They could have even faked one in,
Right. Yeah, I have. What is interesting about that conspiracy, and when I say conspiracy, I don't mean it in any kind of derogatory way. Like, I'm willing to believe just about anything. I'm just using it for convenience sake. That conspiracy and the JFK conspiracy, but also the RFK one, because there's conspiracies about that as well. It's again like that whole thing about how you just can't, like, as soon as they lie to you big once, you just can't believe them ever again.
Exactly.
And that's like the ultimate problem. And I just don't know how civilization survives for very long if the people who are running the show are hiding. Well, you know what I'm trying to say. They're concealing so much that anyone with half a brain who looks into it can, like, see that it adds up. Or excuse me, it doesn't add up. Eventually people are going to figure it out. What did Mark Twain say? You can fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all the people. Wait, how did that go?
All the time.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's kind of what we're going for here. And I don't know if Trump can reverse this or not, but he's probably our last chance to do so. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of credibility being regained and rebuilt into the government right now. Things seem very transparent. Trump can't go 5 minutes without taking questions from the press.
Yeah, right.
And giving consistent answers. When was the last time Joe Biden did that?
Yeah.
That guy couldn't give a consistent answer to, do you want sugar in your iced tea?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that we're healing. I think that things are maybe springing back to where government has credibility again. but it requires a lot of communication and a lot of transparency, and looking into doing deep dives into what they're really doing, like what Musk is up to.
Yeah, right.
And I think that rebuilds credibility. I think that'll heal the problem. But of course, the question is, what happens when the next president comes to power?
Correct. Yeah.
The deep state is just an incredibly powerful group of people.
Yeah. In fact, I obviously they've already tried to take a crack at him twice. I like. I wonder if he's even going to be alive in a year. Now, having
Well,
said
I'm
said
I'm
that,
I'm happy that he's made it this far, but
right?
President Trump loves going out in public. I mean, he
Yeah.
likes going to the Army Navy game and
Right.
Daytona, and every time he does that, I just feel like screaming at the TV, "Stop that!"
Yeah. Yeah.
He should be in a bunker.
So my caveat to my concern on that is, one, I think he is fully aware of the dangers that he faces, and I think that, and I could be wrong, like he knows that he has to keep an eagle eye on the Secret Service. He just can't let that go. Have we found out who the new Secret Service person is going to be yet? Do you know?
Yeah, it was the guy who was with him when he got shot in Butler, PA.
So that guy
He's the guy with the dark shades on.
Okay.
Right by Trump as he's fist pumping.
All right, I didn't hear that. But the other thing
Yeah.
is the other thing that comforts me, if that's the word, is they could take out Trump now and it's not going to matter because Vance, he's going to pick it up and he's going to run with it. And with the people that they've appointed right now, taking out Trump accomplishes nothing because these people they're not going to pull their punches. Is my belief.
Yeah, I agree. In the past month, I've become really, really impressed by J.D. Vance. I mean, the speech he gave to the Europeans, I mean, that was a pants down spanking for their, clamping down on free speech. It was a wonderful thing to see. And saying, we have supported Germany for 80 years, and now you guys are turning into the Soviet Union.
Well,
no.
What's funny about that is, like, Germany supposedly is so high strung about being compared with the Nazis, right? Like, as this is like their sin that they deal with every day. And yet, in the same breath, they're the ones like cracking down on free speech. Sending almost, I think the day after or shortly after Vance gave his speech, their police service went after people who posted on X. So it's like you guys are like a caricature. The thing that you're trying not to become, supposedly, is the thing that you're becoming. Like, dang it, my microphone. Like, there's something seriously wrong with our brains, I think. And Vance called it out. Like, he pulled no punches at all. It was really impressive.
The thing about it is, in my travels around the world, I've seen that Americans think different than the rest of the world. And you're seeing it in what's happening in England and Germany, where when the government tells them, you will not make mean comments, you will not, forward tweets that we consider misinformation, there are people for the most part obey. Yeah. Americans aren't built that way. We were born in rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another podcast probably to think about that. Like what makes us really different? Like why are we so different? But let's get back to let's go back to JFK. And if you had to put money on who you think orchestrated the whole thing, like not the mob which carried it out, but the one who said we're gonna do this, who do you think it would be?
Alan Dulles.
Okay, you said that pretty quickly. So
he had personal and professional motivation, and I think and if you read up on Alan Dulles, the guy was a genius. He had the most astonishing capability. and he built that CIA. And the things that CIA was able to do were practically miracles. And his network went from sea to shining sea.
Yeah.
And I think he just made it, after getting fired in 61 and the Bay of Pigs fiasco, I think he expanded his network to have relationships with the mafia guys and with the Cuban guys.
Yeah.
I think they set up Oswald. They knew they had to control Oswald because he was a bit off the rails as a character. But they knew he was the perfect patsy because, going to the Soviet Union and trying to renounce his U.S. citizenship, and the Soviets thought he was a whack.
Yeah.
And didn't really have much use for him. But where he was stationed when he was in the Marine Corps, it was at a base in Japan that one of the things they did was, psychological experiments. And that, when I read that, it made me think of MK Ultra, which, the intelligence community has said, we stopped that program in the 70s. We don't do mind control anymore. I mean, Kaczynski was a product of MK Ultra. And for folks that are, not inside the circle, MK Ultra was a mind control program, a mind control project that would try to make human beings into weapons. That would weaponize somebody from their psychology, that you could switch them on and make them do something that they normally would not do. And so it made me think, was Oswald one of those MK Ultra subjects like Kaczynski was? But in any case, they had control enough over Oswald to be able to make him look like a reasonable shooter.
Sure. So that reminds me, earlier you mentioned how the CIA owned the media, and that, I believe, started with Operation Mockingbird. Just to put a point, does that ring a bell to you?
From what I understand, the takeover of the media started in 1948. And there was an NSC, National Security Council Order 10/2, if I'm remembering correctly, that talked about all the things that the nascent intelligence community was going to do to, to sort of consolidate power in the government and make sure that, they didn't slip. So if 1948 was the big year, by the time Mockingbird came around, that was like well into the program.
Okay, yeah. So I just looked it up, and Mockingbird was in the 70s, actually. Okay, all right. Okay, well, that's good to know. Good to fix myself in time a little bit.
Yeah, 1948 is sort of the birth of the deep state.
So you don't think? No. Let me rephrase it. So where do you think LBJ fits in this, if at all?
I think he was a passenger. I mean, I think he was a willing guy because he stood to benefit from it. But LBJ had a lot of capabilities, but he wasn't up to an operation like this. An operation like this takes an expert in coordinating covert operations, and that was Dulles all the way.
Yeah, so that brings in the mob. It brings in the ability to tell the Secret Service to pull off the protection, things like that. Where do you think that Castro was involved in any way?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I don't think Castro had the kind of capability it would take to do any operations on U.S. soil. I really don't.
He certainly had the motive, though.
He had a motive, but and the Cubans who were angered at the failure of Bay of Pigs had a motive.
Yeah.
But I think it was really the military and the intelligence community that decided, based on pulling out of Vietnam and the Bay of Pigs, that this had to go down the way they wanted it to go down. And they had to make it look good, right? So they had tendrils into Secret Service. And, that's how the the mafia shooters knew where the route of the motorcade was going to be.
Yeah.
That's why there was an open air limousine.
Right.
And now we know, they pulled that Secret Service agent off so he'd get out of the way of the bullets.
Right. So one
You
of
know,
the other, the AP version here, which, yeah, it's the AP version. It did mention the fact that the car did not have running boards either. So the Secret Service, even the selection of the car itself seems to have been like part of the plan to just make it as unlikely as possible that anyone could intervene to save this man's life. And to be able to coordinate something like that, I mean, you would need weeks, months, or maybe even a year to pull that off, to make sure that all the people in the loop could coordinate and make sure that even the car was not equipped to provide the protection. I mean,
from what I understand from what Files said, the original hit was to be executed in Chicago, but maybe a month before Dallas, they decided not to do Chicago and to do Dallas, and the Chicago mobsters were happy with that because they thought shooting them in Chicago would point the finger back at them.
Yeah, right.
So they liked Dallas. I mean, there are a lot of people in Texas who did not appreciate Kennedy. They were arch conservatives down there, and Kennedy was seen as, a liberal panty waist. So Dallas started to make a lot of sense to the guys who were orchestrating this. But yeah, they really only had a month to put this together, but they had been thinking about it probably since April of 1963.
All right.
So, their inroads into Secret Service, the CIA guys, the talking it through with the mob enforcers. This Files character was apparently just a hitman for the mob,
right?
And that's what he did for a living. And his firearm, the Fireball, which was sort of an overgrown pistol that was in .222 caliber and had a scope on it. I mean, it looks like a very unlikely sniper weapon to me, but when you really dig into what that weapon was about, it had the capability to do this.
Yeah. And
you could smuggle it in a small attaché case.
Right.
So it didn't look like you're coming in with a great big sniper rifle.
Yeah.
Right. So that also made it sort of perfect for what was going on here. But as far as the planning of the thing, that firearm had been used in previous operations. This wasn't the first time it had been used.
Right.
And in fact, according to Files, he put it in the attaché case and took it back to Chicago with him so that they could keep using it.
Yeah, right.
So these guys just weren't thinking like we would think now for a hit.
Yeah, right.
To them, taking somebody out was sort of something you did every week or two.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right, but it seems it's way out of my thought zone that someone could be that cavalier about killing the president.
Oh, they only asked Files. I think it may have even been on the morning of the day, because he was there in a support,
right.
Capacity as sort of a just in case, a backup plan. And then finally they asked him, look, would you be willing to shoot Kennedy? And this was like hours before. And he said, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So if you are watching this and you haven't seen this, the video that we're talking about, the interview, you really should check it out. The guy is really compelling. It's one of those things where you have to evaluate an eyewitness, and we don't really have the capability of checking some of the the logistical things that he mentions, but there are certain things about it that I think you can sort of watch, and there's no question that he doesn't have to sit there and put his eyes back and think about how he's going to reply. He's like, oh well, yeah, of course. I mean, he's ready to go with everything. He doesn't have to think about it. It's just as if he was actually there, and he's just recounting what he did, and it does it does make one think. But in this spirit, though, there are other people who have claimed to be the second shooter. There was a guy from Cuba who claimed it. So, I mean, I guess you do have to take it with a grain of salt.
Well, I think you have to judge by how credible the story seems,
Yeah.
and Files has an answer for everything.
Right.
I also think that claiming you're the second shooter, it's an attempt to be famous, right?
Yeah.
So there's motivations for people to do that. But one thing we haven't talked about when it comes to these documents being released, the doctors who did the autopsy said that the autopsy report was completely different than the autopsy report that they wrote.
Right.
And we still haven't seen autopsy photographs.
Yeah. So, do we think that that's going to be part of the files that are released?
No, because I think that because the actual photos conflict with the fictionalized autopsy report,
Yeah.
that somebody shredded them and burned the shreds.
Right.
Right. So I don't think they're going to be able to find them. But I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe
Right.
maybe the autopsy pictures come up, and I don't think there's anybody alive who can testify to their authenticity now, though.
So I set the table on this question earlier about what the files might contain. Like, on the one hand, like as you just said, any of the files that were really incriminating to anyone would have been destroyed, and yet they have fought so hard for these files to be released. So you mentioned George H. Bush, and
That was very incriminating to somebody. So,
well, is that enough? Is that really? So it ropes in George H. Bush. I mean,
I think that's the main thing, because that takes down George W. Bush, and that's
So
there's too much power there.
So your thought, I don't. Maybe you just haven't thought about it, or maybe this is where you really are. Like, that's the whole thing, that the delay on these files was just to protect George Bush.
Yeah, I think so. If you think about, Pompeo was a CIA director himself.
Yeah. Right.
And George H.W. Bush was a CIA director. I think there's some, solidarity among CIA, and Pompeo was trying to protect, George Sr., and, he didn't want George W. to see his father's reputation scattered to the wind. And, by extension, it would damage George W. And, the CIA solidarity, I think, is what caused those documents to be withheld.
Well, I suppose we're going to find out real soon, I hope. What do you think that so a lot of people have been commenting online in this regards with this Luna lady. Why is she even involved? Just put out the files. And she says that her role is to make sure that the files actually are all released. But a lot of skeptics are like, she's just another filter. Like, you know what I'm saying when I say that?
I get the impression, and it's a raw impression. I don't know how much thought is behind my opinion, but she seems like one of the few good ones. And she seems like she really is taking this seriously. And she's the enemy of somebody who would want to withhold information. And she's going to be a big tattletale if somebody steps on a document and says, no, you're not putting that out there.
Yeah.
So she may be, somebody with real integrity. I mean, we're going to find out, right? Because the other possible explanation is that she's just a Hollywood actor meant to put a happy face on a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that kind of goes to maybe a fear that a lot of us have about the whole paradigm of what Trump's bringing in. We've got all these people who are talking really big, and we have reasons to think that they're going to deliver, but it's so early in the process, we don't actually know for sure if they're going to deliver. I mean, Doge obviously is a good sign, but Cash was just now put in as FBI director today, but we seem to have lost our guest. I feel reasonably confident that he did not touch anything. I know. There he's coming back. There he is. I don't know. Did you? I'll just continue where I was saying. I think a lot of people are just skeptical that Trump's really going to be able to deliver on the transparency that he's promised, and putting Luna in there at all, like even having her, is like another cause for skepticism.
Well, I mean, she's nominally a watchdog, so that should give people some comfort. When I look into what she's doing with it, I kind of like that she's there. I mean, she's there to make public statements about here's what we're releasing and here's what we found, here's what we haven't released yet, and here's the schedule to get it out there. I mean, I kind of like seeing involvement like this rather than just some nefarious, archivist,
right?
Putting it, declassifying it, and nobody knows that it's declassified.
I think I saw somewhere that she has either subpoena powers or prosecutorial powers, even, to make sure these documents are produced. So that's encouraging.
I think members of Congress may have that power. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. So let me just take a second to say here that if you're watching and you wanted to post some questions, even though Mikey can't see them, I can, and I'll be happy to relay them. So feel free to put them in the chat, and we will put them out here for us to respond to. So please feel free to do that. Actually, in a way, we've kind of covered a lot of ground. Actually, we've zipped through things a little bit more quickly than I thought we would in some ways.
Well, it's just, I was trying to keep the conversation away from 9/11, but it flew right in there, didn't
it? Yeah. Yeah. Boy, it's so tempting to go that way, but it doesn't even have to be 9/11. We could talk about COVID, right? Lab leak or wet market. I mean, that as soon as what's his face got in with in the CIA, what was his name? Help me out. The new director of the CIA. Do you remember his name?
No, I don't know him.
Oh, well, I mean, I can find it in two shakes of a lamb's tail, but like almost the day after, the CIA announced that, yeah, we kind of think it was a lab leak after all. I'm looking at
see what Brock has to say.
Oops, wrong. CIA.
John Ratcliffe.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, only a day or two after he was confirmed, the CIA released a report which supposedly had already been written under Biden, but not released, that said they were sort of weakly leaning towards the lab leak as opposed to the other alternative.
Well, the full conspiracy narrative is that Fauci was having that Wuhan lab financed specifically to make COVID, and then it was leaked from the lab intentionally. So, I mean, it's not a good look,
Yeah. No, absolutely not. But Like this is like you. It's like one conspiracy after another. Where for ever since the JFK assassination, uh, I'm trying to think suddenly. Like, was there anything before the JFK assassination that even comes to this level of dishonesty by our government? What do you
Well,
think?
there was an operation um, in like 1960 or 61 where they were going to, I think it was Operation North Winds. They were
Oh,
going
yep,
to, you know, CIA was going to do terrorist operations inside America attributable to the Cubans that
right,
would rile up the population to get everybody to want to attack Cuba. And it involved airplane crashes and
yeah,
bombs going off and, you know, a lot of evil stuff.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that was really sort of the first sniff we had of things that the CIA was doing that was quite frankly evil.
yeah, and they've done so much more since. So that actually dovetails to a question that I wanted to ask you a little bit earlier, because you are a Cold War warrior, and a lot of these things were justified in the name of the Cold War. Even the JFK assassination, some have said, well, he was going soft on the Russians. I know that you don't like the Russians. I don't think my that's my impression is you and the Ruskies don't get along. You know, I mean, do you have any animosity for the JFK pre-assassination? Like,
Well, I thought JFK himself was actually not a bad Cold Warrior
hmm.
when it came to the Soviets. But I thought he handled the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, I think the CIA might be involved in this broadcast. Come on now. Jeez, Radcliffe, I thought you were on our side. Just like that, he's gone. I feel like he's going to pop up again, sort of on his own. Yeah. We've been worried about the black van people. So I still don't know how he felt about JFK's handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Oh,
Hey,
you're okay.
I think my connection blinked. It's either that or the CIA is
Yeah, yeah,
jamming my transmission.
yeah. So what you were saying was JFK's handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but
Yeah, I think he did a good job on that.
okay,
His military chiefs all wanted to, go hard line and kick the shit out of Cuba
uh huh.
and the Russians. And I think Kennedy was the cooler head that prevailed.
So you think that he would have probably successfully wound down the Cold War? Maybe there's a good chance.
I don't think so because the Soviets, they were locked into their Iron Curtain mentality,
Yeah,
and they had to, in my mind, they had to be pushed back on. Short of going to nuclear war, but
right.
I think they needed to be opposed in every arena.
Yeah,
And I think that the turnaround that Poland had, that was the first crack in their wall. I think that was sort of a CIA color revolution going on over there.
hmm.
So I think we were involved in that. By saying we, I mean America.
Yeah,
And then East Germany. I think the same thing was going on in East Germany. And I think one by one, we were working on every non-Russian country in the behind the Iron Curtain to get them
yeah,
to to weaken their alliance.
yeah. So I've been doing a lot of reading about the CIA, about some of their nasty operations, and it's really tough because on the one hand, I read about what they're trying to do. Well, just even in this context, like they tried to assassinate Castro, quite a few times actually. Um, but that's like the tip of the iceberg. And you think to yourself, man, what a bunch of assholes, you know. But then, but then you look at the other side of the ledger, and the Soviets were not great. They they were pretty bad too, and you don't want to like you don't want to own what the CIA in our country did in these things, but you can almost understand it. You know, I almost
Well,
hate to say that.
if you research the KGB, you see that the KGB was just evil from top to bottom,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were vicious. Okay, so in the Cold War, I think the CIA was doing the right thing. I mean, one of CIA's operations that was critical to winning the Cold War was Project Jennifer, Project Azorian, where they pulled that Gulf submarine off the bottom of the sea,
yeah.
and they were looking for intel on the nuclear weapons, and any codes or code books in their safes. And I think that operation was even more successful than we eventually found out, because I think that operation led us to being able to read the Russians' mail.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
I think we really had an intelligence breakthrough that got us, all the way into the Kremlin,
but
and we were
then
listening to everything they
right,
said.
but then you have to look at like what they're considering, like Operation Northwoods, which you brought up. I mean, that's pretty damn evil too. I know they didn't do it, so as far as I know. So I mean, I guess that's good. But I mean,
Well, I think it was Kennedy who said no, they can't do it.
right? So it, on the one hand, yeah, KGB bad, but on the other hand, CIA good, but also, dang, you guys give us a really bad name too. It's really hard looking back and trying to be a patriotic American and try to have to reconcile things like Operation Northwoods with, or Operation Mongoose and others, with our idea of America as the ones who are righteous.
Well, we're all brought up in school to believe that, but as we all grew up, we found that in a lot of ways, we're the bad guys.
Yeah,
But I think realizing that we've been acting as the bad guys goes a long way to us getting a hold of ourselves and again becoming the good guys.
yeah. Probably the Soviets never had anything like that.
I mean, if you look at the Russian Federation, I mean, it's run by a dictator, right?
Right.
And he's kept in power by a bunch of rich oligarchs. And Russia's a gas station with nuclear missiles.
Yeah, good way of
And
putting it.
there's no succession plan. So whoever Russia is, when Putin eventually dies, we have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So they're a
Yes.
big question mark, and they got a lot of nuclear warheads.
Yeah,
So
not a good situation. Yeah. So we covered quite a bit of ground today and probably turned over another 3 or 4 podcasts that we're going to have. Let's see, we got 9/11. We've got
Cold War sea stories.
Cold War sea stories. You know, I, I'm kind of like holding myself back. I've been wanting to ask you more about your thoughts about 9/11 this whole time. But I was a good man, good boy. I like, no, don't want to like start something that we can't finish. Um, but yeah, we clearly have a lot to talk about. And sometime too, I think beyond just the your Cold War stories of being a submariner, just your experience as a writer, right? That's something that you and I have a lot in common with. That in itself could be a fun conversation to have.
Oh, behind the scenes of
Yeah,
the life of a writer,
that's right. Yeah,
it's a lot crazier than people think it is.
I think so. The life of the mind, especially if the mind is a little crazy, right?
I don't think you can be a writer without that.
That's right. Well, thank you again for being on. I feel like there's so much that we've left unsaid, but I think that maybe the 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 other podcast, which we did not mention, will be what happens when the files are actually released, and then we'll see, right? We'll see how what comes of it. So I think we're gonna have to plan on having another conversation about that when we find out if you are right about George Bush. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I feel like it's gonna have to be more than Bush. That's my feeling. I'll just say that out loud, just so I'm on the record, so you're not the only one who is hanging out to dry on predictions. Do you want to
Well,
take a minute to sum up?
yeah, I think the main thing that we keep touching on is this caused our distrust of government, and that was a revolutionary thing that happened in America.
Yeah,
Because before JFK's assassination, I think everybody believed exactly what the government told them.
yeah,
And that's created a new age in America where, we didn't believe anything the government told us. And we were right to disbelieve it.
yeah, yeah. Right up to this current day, in fact.
So yeah, the world changed and America changed that day for forever.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm you'll be able to still listen, but I'm gonna close you down here for a minute while I wrap things up. And thank you again for being on. You are well on your way to being what they call a friend of the program. So thank you.
Good to know. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Okay, let's see here. There he goes. I'll make myself temporarily big, scare the children. If I can get to me. Here we are. I don't really have to. Oh my gosh. It's terrible. No, no, no. We won't do that. It's horrible. Smaller. I'll just put myself over there. Oh boy. I get dandruff too. This is not going the way that I thought the clothes would be. I would recommend that you pick up this book. Sometime I will promote some of my own books as well. Um, we will have Mikey DiMercurio back. I'm looking forward to that already. There's a lot of things to talk about. I hope that you like and subscribe to this channel. We, I want to promote the books that we publish on this podcast. But as I've said in previous episodes as well, I just think there's so much to talk about that is outside of like the daily outrage. Like every day, the media feeds us the next thing to be angry about, and that's all we talk about. And you see it on X. Doesn't matter where it is. Like even X is vulnerable to it, and I just feel like we shouldn't be a slave to what the media narrative is of the day. There's lots of other important things to talk about. And when we look at books are like fixed in time, as it were. And if you're going to talk about the ideas of a book, it means you're going to have to talk about the ideas that go well beyond whatever it is we're talking about today. So, yeah, we talked about politics. We talked about politics today, even. But this is not going to be a show about politics. It's going to be a show about ideas. And if that's something that you like, I hope that you will like and subscribe and tell all of your friends about it. And as I always say, if we promote a book on this podcast, go out and buy 100. That's all we ask. Thanks for watching. I am signing off. Now I have to go through this whole process here. So I'll actually bring Mikey back here just for a minute. There you are. You kind of look angry now.
Yeah, I like that face better.
So what I learned from a previous broadcast was when I end the stream, it actually cuts off the. If I end it right now, the YouTube shuts it off immediately, like right there. So I have to like do this thing where I stop streaming